Hey everybody, welcome back. Today I'm just going to be talking about some surf fishing tips, how to get started, what is surf fishing, bait, rigs, and all that good stuff. Let's start off. What is surf fishing? Surf fishing is just land fishing to me at the beach. You can land fish anywhere. You can fish from jetties, from bridges. Surf fishing specifically is at the beach for me. The main reason is the gear. So we're usually using longer rods, the rigs not so much. You can use similar rigs in other places, but it's mainly the rods and some of the other smaller equipment. So where are you gonna surf fish? Anywhere you have really access to. Generally, the more and the easier the access is, the more competition, or there's gonna be a lot more anglers, surfers, beachgoers there. I tend to go where there's fewer people, even though if there's worse fishing, if there's better fishing somewhere and there's a lot of people, I'm less inclined to go. I know that sounds kind of weird, but I'd rather go and be a little more isolated, enjoy my time, and either not catch fish or catch fewer fish. But that's just me personally. So location also is dependent upon what kind of fish that you want to catch, the species. I want to go catch pompano. Pompano generally come into the area around March or April, and they stick around through the summer, and then there's kind of a big rush from north to south. They kind of migrate, I guess, north to south in like a fallish migration, and then they drop off. So in that time frame, I can use pompano rigs, I can use the sand fleas, certain things that I know that pompano like in certain locations, which I have experience catching them in. So location and species go hand in hand. If you're looking to catch redfish, you're gonna catch them most likely on the beach at certain times of year, maybe not all year long. So there's a lot of variables there. We have the beach, we're on Jekyll Island, beachfront here. The first thing I look for is some sort of topography, something different. If you look down the beach, you can't really see much other than this. This is a big ditch. And on a high tide, the tide comes all the way up to these rocks. So last night, and I'm probably gonna do it tonight, we're fishing over here and I'm dropping my bait somewhere along in this trough. It's just something different. Fish will dive into there and hang out or whatever. My experience is you find something different, the fish hang around it. Same thing. So this is the same ditch. It comes all the way out, and that same run out I was talking about yesterday, it empties out here. So this is also another good place. Probably when the tide comes up a little bit more and everything's washing out that direction, it's a good place. So gear, man, let's just start right off. We'll start with the reels. What can you use, what sizes and all that stuff. Generally, I'm gonna recommend like 3,000 size up to like a 6,000 sized reel for various purposes. Obviously the smaller, like 3,000, you could maybe go a little smaller for some smaller fish. But the smaller the reel size, the smaller the fish generally, because it's not gonna have the line capacity or the stopping power of the, what's it called? The thing that I'm drawing a blank. Drag. It's the drag. The smaller reels aren't gonna have as much drag. So shark fishing, big fish fishing, you're probably gonna end up with a 5,000-6,000, at least 5,000-6,000 sized reel with some heavy drag, bigger line and all that stuff. Whiting, pompano, stuff like that, you can get away with, the 3,000 size reel. So just for example, a lot of that has to do with line capacity as well. On average, I think my rod or my reels were doing about 300 yards, anywhere from 200 to 400. Obviously, if you're doing shark fishing, you're going to want more. Obviously, probably around 400, 350, 400. And then if you're going whiting fishing, lighter tackle, you're going to get away with 200 yards because hopefully you're casting, 50 to 100 yards with your surf fishing gear. The rods, I didn't really know a whole lot about the rods until the last couple years. I always just went to Walmart and bought a 10 to 12 foot rod, the really stiff ones, the thick ones, the heavier ones. And they're okay, they get the job done. I definitely advise just getting into it, buy what you can. They used to be 20, 30, 40 bucks. I don't know what they are now at Walmart, but last year I bought a new one. It's a nicer one. I think I bought it off Amazon. It had good reviews. It's thinner, it's lighter, and it has a lot more action. So the tip is a little more wobbly, and that thing casts like a dream. It's wonderful to use. And I think it was around 90 bucks. 10 to 15 feet for a rod. is a good general purpose. You can go shorter, of course, if you're not making long casts. I'm not sure I'd really go longer than 15 foot. I've got a 15 foot and it's okay. It's just a little unwieldy when you're trying to get into the car. I have a sedan. I hunt and fish out of a sedan, so you know, I've got it where I can push the back seat down and run it all the way through to the to the front of the car. But it works. It's just, you know, anything past 15 feet, I'm not sure you're getting much. I don't know if it's any better, basically, because my 12 foot that's a little bit got more action will make just as good a cast, if not better, than that 15 foot rod, which is a lot more stiff. I really like the 15 foot rod when I'm shark fishing, just because it has a little more backbone and I can put a lot of pressure on that fish and get them in a little bit quicker. And the one thing to consider, like I said, about those rods is I've found with the more action, so that if that tip is a little bit more wobbly or flexible, you're generally going to get a little bit longer of a cast, or you're going to get a longer of a cast. It's just the way that it loads, because as you have that weight and it loads back, and then it's like a trebuchet or a slingshot or whatever. The stiffer the rod, you're not going to get as much load on it, and it just kind of flattens out as opposed to like arches or whatever. I don't know the physics behind it. I can just tell you that the more flexible the rod tip, generally the longer the cast. So if you're like casting lures and stuff, that's very important. That's more for the, you know, northeast. I mean, you can do it on the southeast, but generally we're tossing bait and weight. So for the line, I pretty much exclusively use braid, anywhere from 20 to 40 pound braid. Spool it up, and then from the braid I have a 2 to 4 foot length of monofilament, and the monofilament just acts as a little bit of a shock absorber, because the braid's doesn't give a lot. It's very, what's the right word? I'm struggling for words today. I don't know. It doesn't give a lot, but mono has a little give, so there's some forgiveness there. Plus it's clear, so it's a little bit harder for the fish to see. Generally I'm doing 20 to 40 pound braid, and then going to do 20 to maybe 40 or 60 pound monofilament. So if I'm going for whiting, pompano, bluefish, stuff like that, I'm gonna put on 20 pound braid, probably 250 to 300 yards, and then I'm gonna put on 20 pound monofilament, probably about 3 feet, and with a uni to uni knot. So I don't know a whole lot of fishing knots for as long as I've been fishing. I know a simple knot to put a hook on a monofilament or a fluorocarbon, and then I know a uni to uni knot. Those are literally the only 2 knots that I know, and those are the only 2 knots that I use. So braid to monofilament, uni to uni knot, and then from the monofilament, you know, you make a simple fish tie. Look up YouTube how to tie a fish knot, you know, to our rig. So for my line, it's a pretty simple setup from the braid to mono to the rig. The rigs are basically what is either created, you can make them yourself, or you can purchase them. I generally purchase them because they're cheap and I don't have the time, nor do I feel like making my own rigs. I have made shark rigs in the past with some success, but nowadays I just purchase them because they're easier. They're not that expensive and it saves time. I use my double hook rig 90-95% of the time off the beach. It's simple. It's got 2 hooks and a weight, and you know, 2 hooks up high, 1 weight on the bottom, and it's a great way to catch fish. So it's kind of fail proof. I put a pyramid weight on the bottom of it 99% of the time, and that works great. So that's the rig that I recommend to start with. You can do like egg sinker rigs. There's all sorts of rigs out there. You can look them up, but the double hook rig is pretty much my go-to. And then I do have a shark rig. It's just a big hook with a wire leader, and then from that I tie the monofilament, and then obviously from that to the braid. So those are, if I had 2, I'm going with those 2. For any general day of fishing. If I'm gonna go a little more hardcore, I'll have some variability, but for the most part, you know, it's gonna be those 2 and you're gonna be good to go. You know, hook sizes vary, of course. There's all sorts of different hooks and sizes. General fishing, so when I say general fishing, I'm saying you're just going out there trying to catch dinner, your pompano, your whiting, your bluefish, your, you know, ladyfish, your funfish, redfish, red drum, sheep's head, whatever you can catch off the beach. I'm gonna use anywhere from like a 2/0 to 3/0 hook, circle hook. The circle hooks have a better hookup ratio for me. just because it's basically designed to self-set. So when that fish bites it and it kind of makes a run, it's gonna hook right in that corner of the mouth right there. So circle hooks are great, plus they're easier to get out. They're harder for that fish to swallow as well, so it's a little bit safer if you're catching and releasing. If you're shark fishing, the size of the hook, you're looking at probably 6/0 to 8/0. Some of the shark rigs that are ready to go that you purchase already have the hook on there. So you know, you take your fish or whatever your bait is, hook it on there, throw it out, and you're good to go. So what else do you need when you go surf fishing? You know, that covers pretty much the basic stuff. That covers the rod, the reel, the rig, the line, and all that. But what else do you need to go fishing? You know, there's the rod holders are pretty much like the second most important thing. Without rod holders, you're holding your rod for who knows how long, which is incredibly uncomfortable. So I highly recommend rod holders, sand spikes, stuff like that. So don't forget them. Always keep those things together, because if you leave the house and you get to the beach and you're like, oh my gosh, what are you gonna, I found no good way to hold a rod and reel of that size. You can't like stick it in the sand. So you're kind of out of luck if that happens. I highly recommend keeping your sand spikes with all your fishing gear so you do not forget them. A cheap and easy way to go get these and make these, I mean, you can go to the hardware store and basically get a nice diameter PVC and just cut it with a hacksaw at an angle where the end is tapered, like kind of like a tip, and then you can just shove that in the ground. You know, the one thing, and I'll show a video of this as well, that is very convenient, that's changed my life with fishing. I always took a backpack, but having like a legit fishing backpack where you can have multiple areas of carrying all your gear is amazing. It really is. So it's so easy to put it on your back, especially if you have kids, which I do, and I take them all the time. Backpack all the gear in it, you know, a cart, which we'll talk about in a second, but to have extra hooks, all your rigs, weights, lures, all your pliers, you know, cutters, everything you need, you know, tape measure, everything is in there. And then you still have room for some snacks and for some drinks if you wanted to, like, you know, a bottle of water or something. So I highly recommend, if you don't have a fishing backpack, they are a little more expensive. It took me 10, 12 years before I actually got one for Christmas. My wife got it for me for Christmas a couple years ago, and I love it. I love it to death. All my fishing stuff is in there, so I take it and use it all the time. The other thing that I delayed so long on, and I didn't really need it in the years past, I would just carry everything in an old beat up backpack, all my rigs and little, you know, organizing things, plus my bait and the rods, reels, and the sand spikes. I would just carry all that by hand. But after I got a fishing cart, it totally changed everything. It is so convenient just to put everything in that cart, have your backpack on, and roll it down the beach. So if I had two things that I highly recommend spending money on, a cart, like a beach cart, and or a nice fishing backpack. But spend some money on a cart, probably a fishing backpack, and you'll enjoy it, I promise you. You definitely want to bring extra hooks, extra rigs, and some extra monofilament. I don't bring extra braid just because it's such a pain to re-spool that thing on the beach, that if I had something terrible happened, a lot of times I'm just gonna take the rod out of commission, and I'm not gonna fish with that rod anymore. So, you know, if you have something catastrophic happen with the braid, you know, you can take extra braid and re-spool the whole thing. My fishing trips are only 2 to 3 hours most of the time anyway. I'm never out there all day. If you're gonna be out there all day, I probably would bring extra braid because you'll have time to do that, but not for me, it's not worth it. In terms of like the number of rods I normally take, on average, I take 2 rods per trip. 2 is a very manageable number for me. I've done up to 3 by myself. Once you get to doing 3 by yourself, you're constantly going, you're constantly checking one, rebaiting it, throwing it out, you know, walking back, reeling in the next one. Like, you'd be surprised how much time it takes. You're constantly going, for me at least, on 3 rods. 2 is more relaxing. If I have my older son, I can definitely do 2 rods. It's pretty manageable and easy. If I have my younger one, I'm just doing 1 rod because he requires a lot more attention, so I can't be concentrating on the fishing so much. I gotta make sure that he's doing all right and safe. So usually it's 2. Usually for me, it's 1 or 2 rods, but it just depends on the day and which kiddo I got with me. If I got both kiddos, it's probably 0 rods at the beach. Of course, if you're gonna take some fish home for dinner, don't forget a cooler. You want a cooler, otherwise that fish is gonna bake in the sun and It's not the kind of dried out fish chip that you want to eat for dinner. Bleh. Another tip is just make sure everything's rigged up ahead of time. You don't want to get out to the beach and spool your reel. Like I just said, it's terribly annoying. So make sure the reel's spooled up. Go ahead and have the mono attached to it. And then all you have to do when you get out there, I mean, some people have everything all hooked up, ready to go. I don't travel with the hooks on my rods and reels because they're in my car, my sedan, by the way. So I don't want it hooking into my child or myself or into pieces of my car. And so I leave the hooks off, de-rigged, and then when I get there, I'll rig it up. So, but it's nice when you have pretty much everything ready to go and then you just rig it up when you get there. So in terms of bait, what are you gonna use? For surf fishing in general, shrimp is a great bait. For surf fishing, shrimp is pretty much a good all-around bait. I use it from the beach all the time. You're gonna catch, I've caught pompano, whiting, bluefish, ladyfish, redfish, black drum, sheep's head, sharks. I mean, I've caught so many species off shrimp that it's pretty much a go-to. I mean, if I have one bait, it's shrimp. You know, you can do a second one, and I recommend mullet. Mullet's a good second choice, just depending on time of year and what you're targeting, of course. But after that, you got sand fleas and squid and clams. And what I have done the last couple years is included a product called fish bites on the hook along with like the shrimp or the mullet. And it has increased, I've seen an increase in my catch ratio, or how many fish I'm actually catching per trip. Obviously I'm not sponsored or anything, but I've found that it's really helpful. Fresh bait is generally better than frozen. So if I go to the bait store, so when it comes to bait, try to get fresh bait as opposed to frozen. The phones are growing off the hook. The yard guys are outside. Is there any other noise that can be made right now? So fresh bait over frozen, definitely get fresh bait if you can. If you can catch your bait, that's even better, especially for shark fishing. I'll take a bluefish or a ladyfish that I just caught, cut it up, put it on the hook, and that's like the best shark bait that you can get. Fresh bait is way better. Fresh shrimp over frozen shrimp, it'll perform better. It's so much better. Fresh over frozen. And just a couple tips with like the casting. If I've got two rods, just from a strategic standpoint, I'll throw one long, throw one short, and try to cover, you know, different water column areas to see where the fish are at. You know, if one rod is getting hit a little bit more, I'll move the other one closer, or I'll move it down. The other trick is if you have both rods out, neither one of them are getting any hits, then I do leapfrog. So I'll move down the beach, I'll move this one down this way, and then, you know, if nothing here, I'll move this one down the next way. So that way you're covering ground, but it's just hard to pick everything up and move. You just do it little by little, and it makes it a lot more tolerable. Well, I hope these were helpful tips for you. These are just some of the things that I do to increase my chances of catching fish and to just enjoy my time out on the water. And so I hope this was helpful for you, and we'll see you next time.